I'm Halcyon, this is Hug Nation, and I thought I would take a few moments in this incredibly charged political climate to discuss abortion. I know you're thinking, you know what we need right now? An older white guy to chime in on this important topic. Now, honestly, I have been hearing voices that I respect say, why aren't more men speaking up? And other voices saying men need to shut the F up. And I had over the weekend was at some gatherings and was getting in some conversations with some powerful women that I respect. And they were pushing me to, why don't you say something? Like, all right. Okay, I'll say something. But please know that this is all wrapped up in my very clear recognition that I do not have the experiences or the anatomy to really chime in with anything other than a collection of information and perspectives that seem to resonate with me or I seem to find compelling. There's some conversations happening that while I find them to be riling me up and make me agitated, I don't think they're all that fruitful in getting to a place of solution or harmony or progression. So, all those being said, I recognize that abortion is one of those topics that is divisive by its very nature, like chemtrails or vaccination or putting pineapple on pizza. There are certain topics where people do not go into a conversation about this with an open-mindedness. Nobody chimes in to a debate about abortion thinking, you know what, I'm still kind of like undecided. So I'm really curious as to what you think. Please share your perspective and then I will ponder without bias. Now, I am this way, we're all this way. There are tons of areas where I struggle to be open-minded as I'm listening to other people. And I don't necessarily think that's always a bad thing. I think that there are times when we need to have discernment, and hopefully we can practice as we become aware of the times when we are hearing people pre-closed off. We can try to put ourselves in their perspective and go, oh, if I'm doing that, then they are doing that. And so how possibly can either of us get to a closer place if we're both coming at it from this perspective of how can I change their mind? 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 A couple thoughts. First off, I think for the conversation to take place and not it just be a shouting match, you have to I think it is a valid perspective to believe that life begins at conception. And I think that it's okay to allow people that premise. But you have to put your head around that before you can start to have additional debates. You can't make a case for a woman's right to choose and think somebody's going to hear it if they believe that there's a baby, you're choosing between the life of a baby or the whimsical decision of a woman. Now, I would guess that if you're listening to me right now, you're bristling up and saying, like, that's not what's happening. I agree. But if you were not super informed about the gestation process and had been listening to people telling you that that we're killing babies, then you have to recognize that choice, that belief is based in a internal thought of compassion. And so to attack somebody is not going to make any progress. So I think that in that way, there needs to be this willingness to deal with the other's premise as we have the conversation. And then you can kind of start to go, well, what are you talking about? Like when you're saying a baby, a life, what are we exactly talking about? I saw someone post there was a comment where someone said, you got to put yourself in the shoes of the fetus. And the brilliant response was, fetus don't wear shoes, which I thought was a great way to go like, hey, this is not a life in the way that we picture a life. This is not a baby in the way that we picture a baby, and kind of digging into that. Now, okay. Now, the other thing that to be aware of is how easy it is to get on board with defending the unborn. It is kind of like a trick for someone who wants to believe that they're a good Christian, but also wants to be spiteful and hateful, and maybe I won't use those strong words, that finds a way in their spiritual beliefs to not be compassionate towards living children, people of different backgrounds, different beliefs, different faiths, different economic realms. If you want to turn a blind eye to the people that Jesus made his career out of helping, you can kind of pretend that you're a compassionate person if you fight for the rights of the unborn, because at that point, they do not have any of the traits or needs that a fellow part of the human family requires. And so it's this kind of, it's a way that you can keep yourself feeling righteous while not making any effort, make any change, showing any real true compassion, and reaching out in any way to people that need your help. And let's say you do believe that there is a miracle that happens at conception. Okay, valid. You can have that belief, but if that's the case, everything falls apart when you realize that people are all up in arms about abortion, but not about fertility clinics. An IVF process of taking an egg and matching it with sperm, creating the miracle of the beginnings of life, implanting that back into the female, and then taking the most viable embryos, putting them back, and then destroying the rest. That seems like 10 times more gnarly than a abortion of a fetus in a womb based on, accidental circumstances. The deliberate creation of life just so that you can then pick and choose the best ones? Yeeks! But nobody cares. And I think that that's a good illustration, that that's a good part of the dialogue and conversation, so that we can start to realize what we're really talking about. And you got to do it in a way that you don't, I see it often in these memes and stuff where people bring up this fact, but it's so attacking. It's so, it forces somebody who has been holding on to this belief of the miracle of conception and then says, yeah, but what about IVF fertility clinics? And kind of follows it up with a poke that makes people defensive and kind of shuts down the conversation. And that's, I think critical in any of this, is to hopefully get people to see, oh, actually, you're right. I guess if I do believe this, then I have to believe this too, and therefore I don't believe that, so maybe I need to make some room here, or maybe I need to go deeper, as opposed to forcing people to dig in and defend their premise. Because that's what we do. We only listen to the information that confirms what we believe. So, and if you turn someone into an enemy or an opponent, then it's so easy to disregard what we say. There was a great, there's one thing that I think is a dangerous slippery slope, and I should say I'm not politically, I'm not the political mastermind or anything, but I do, there's a lot of outrage about the no exceptions for rape and incest. And while that is incredibly enraging and really kind of shines a bright light on the mentality of what people seem to be acceptable and the disrespect, I think that's also a very dangerous thing to focus on. In general, over the last couple of years, I think that a lot of dangerous things have happened while we left progressive people have been focused on incredibly enraging ideas and topics and acts. We focus on something that's really blatantly wrong, and then some subtle, insidious things happen in the background. Speaking of subtle and insidious, we Anybody who seems to think that it doesn't matter who's president, I know that came out a lot, and people are still saying that as we get the next, as we head into an election. President picks Supreme Court justices. I don't know if you remember the last televised confirmation, but Brett C. seems to have quite a chip on his shoulder against the left because they tried to sabotage him. So how we could be headed into a, this is probably, you know, I'm not saying anything new here, but this is a scary thing as you realize the areas that we have voices in and the areas we don't have voices in. And the areas that when things slide that matter and things that slide and really maybe don't matter as much. One of the things that, the arguments that I saw that I thought was very compelling was about body autonomy. There was this post in a Tumblr blog called Fandoms and Feminism. And they were responding to the comment that my body, my choice only makes sense when another life isn't at stake. Okay, that's a valid thought, but this was their response. They said, fun fact, if my younger sister was in a car accident and desperately needed a blood transfusion to live, and I was the only person on earth who could donate blood to save her, and even though donating blood is relatively easy, safe, and a quick procedure, no one can force me to give blood. Yes, even to save the life of a fully grown person, it would be illegal to force me to donate blood if I didn't want to. See, we have this concept called bodily autonomy. It's this cultural notion that a person's control over their own body is above all important and must not be infringed upon. Like, we can't even take life-saving organs from corpses unless the person whose corpse it was gave consent before their death. Even corpses get bodily autonomy. To tell people that they must sacrifice their bodily autonomy for 9 months against their will in an incredibly expensive, invasive, difficult process to save what some people view as another human life, debatable claim in the early stages of pregnancy, when the vast majority of abortions are performed, is desperately unethical. You can't even ask people to sacrifice bodily autonomy to give up organs they aren't using anymore after they died. You're asking people who can become pregnant to accept less bodily autonomy than we grant to dead bodies. I thought that was awesome. Somebody pointed out about the care of children. Right, if you believe that a miracle happens at conception and we are responsible for that life, then we need to stay responsible for that life. We need to continue to value the miracle of life, even when those miraculous little things become gay or are revealed to be gay or Muslim or poor or are born in a different country. And so I think kind of that's another one of those great ways of like, well, if you believe this, then how do you justify this? Just asking and not poke, 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 poke. Another thing, the main reason that I want to talk about this is just how infuriating it is how little responsibility men are given in this equation and in this debate. Women make eggs every month, right? So if there's a pregnancy, it's a guy, a man, a sperm creating vessel played a part. And yet, how much of the responsibility in the avoiding pregnancy is given to men? I saw another post where it said something like, if a woman must be responsible for, is unable to terminate a pregnancy, then a man should be unable to leave a relationship. If a woman has to take on a lifelong responsibility, so should the man. I'm like, oh, what if a pregnancy occurred, then both parties that participated in that creation that are now legally married, wouldn't that change the way that men went about their business? And that's really the kind of thing what I think comes to the thing that I'm surprised is not being talked about more, except in joking ways, is men making the choice. Men having a vasectomy. You don't want to create unwanted pregnancies? You know an easy way to fix the problem? Fix the problem. It's super simple. In fact, that's what I did. 9 or so years ago, I realized, well, let me take a couple of years farther back. When I was younger, I was, as I still am, aggressively pro-choice. And I was of the mind that if I had an unexpected, unwanted pregnancy, I was very comfortable with deciding or working with my partner to have an abortion. Now, because of my aggressive use of birth control and my incredibly lucky past history, I never had a pregnancy. I did, however, have a bunch of scares. And the most recent scare was about 10 years ago or something. And in that situation, my partner, even though we'd had a conversation that we didn't want to have to keep the child, if that ever happened, once she thought she was pregnant, which I was like, wait a minute, I don't understand how biologically that could have happened, but life sometimes finds a way. But she started to look into prenatal care and started to go into the process of like, I'm going to have this baby. And I was like, what? And then the kind of thought that I thought we were both kind of partners in avoiding this pregnancy, and the fact that if she wanted to get pregnant, then that's a very different situation. And it put me in that kind of male perspective, like, whoa, what if it's all on me? How can I ensure that I don't ever have to make that decision? And I got to a place where my head where I was like, even though I'm still incredibly pro-choice, I never want to have to make that choice. And I never want to put a woman in the position of having to make that choice. And the only way that I can do that is fix the problem. Get snipped. Now, at that point in my life, I had not decided if I was absolutely certain that if I wanted to have a child or not, if I wanted to be a parent ever. I didn't at the time. I'd never been in a relationship where I felt like, yeah, we should be parents together. But it was a lot to decide. I now know I never want to be a parent. So what did I do? I froze some sperm. And I knew that there was the medical ability to get a reversal. So I created the scenario where I will never make an unwanted pregnancy. If I am going to have a kid, it would be by choice. And guess what? About 2 years ago, connected with Amy, and we discussed all of the legal, the therapeutic, the custodial, all the issues involving the creation of this life. We had those conversations, like literally Planned Parenthood gave her my sperm, and baby Asher is now 6 weeks old. So this is like, I feel like those white people are telling me you should talk about this, because I'm the example of how to be a aggressively pro-choice man. And I chose the way that I want to participate in life. And I can choose again. But I will never have to make the decision that I don't want to make. And I will never have to ask someone else to make that decision. That being said, I did participate in IVF. So I think that for any man to chime in on this debate, they need to have a vasectomy first. If you do all you can as a man, if you care that much about unwanted pregnancy, that you will do everything in your possibility to make it a legitimate choice and never have this happen, then we can come to the table and start talking about how we can govern other people's bodies after we have taken full responsibility for our own. But until then, it's, I don't go into an airplane and start telling the pilot, no, that's the wrong metaphor. You know what I'm saying. So at this point, I feel a lot of pain and compassion towards women in this country that are having to hear these conversations with so much disregard and with such a a deafness, and how I can't imagine how that must feel to be, to be talked about and told how little your experiences count in this. So again, I do not know I am not in a position to speak to this. I'm in a massive listening place, but I'm also in a place where I want to be an advocate. A lot of people have asked men to share their stories. This is my story, and I judge nobody's story, and know that we all make the best decisions we can at any time. And if we ever think we know what's best for someone else, then we need to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. I am pro personal choice. I am pro quality of life. And if we as a culture want to aggressively push both of those things, I think that's how we make the solution. We don't just defend unborn and neglect the living. We collectively look at life and the quality of life for all people and make decisions. And sometimes those decisions might be hard decisions. We have a wacky concept in our country or in our world, the Western world, that life should be maintained at all costs. We keep very, very old people alive as long as possible at huge financial drain on the system. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Nature is all about not everything surviving all the time. For most of the history of the world, enough kids or enough pregnancy was a crapshoot if you'd be successful. Now we have this like expectation that all pregnancies must survive. That's crazy. You know what would happen in nature if all babies or all embryos of all species survive? It's not supposed to work that way. So not every sea tortoise is supposed to make it to the sea. Not every embryo is supposed to be a human child. But if you're going to force that to happen, you better protect that being. Deal? Okay, get your vasectomy and then respond. Thank you for tuning in today and for all that you do to get your voice heard and to take care of yourself and to be compassionate towards people on any side of the issue. It is only through compassion that I think we can make progress. Thank you. I love you.
Your life is perfect. If you're not aware of that, or there are things in the way of you feeling that and experiencing that, I can help. Join me for the pink path. Your purpose, your perfection, it's right underneath the surface. Let's bring it out together.